Hi team, welcome to our second team meeting. I'm really excited to talk you through a few of the topics that I actually got from many of you to talk about during these team meetings. So thank you for jumping in and responding very quickly to the first video that I sent out. I'm excited about the potential of having these meetings every other week with you. So first of all, if you haven't seen that initial video that introduces me and the organization of our team, our translation operations team here at headquarters, and just given the download of what this whole meeting is about, please pause the video right now, and I've put a link in the bottom description of this video for you to go back and watch that first video that I recorded. So pause, go back and watch that video, then come back and watch this one. Okay, one of the primary topics that I was asked to talk about this week in our team meeting is just to help everybody kind of orient themselves on the organization and structure of translation and everything else PSD here at headquarters. So I'm going to walk you through that a little bit today. I am using the whiteboard. I didn't make a really fancy presentation to screen capture for you, just because if I started doing that, then I think I would have been overwhelmed by the dauntingness of trying to create too much presentation for these meetings, and I might not do it. And so I just wanted to go ahead and jump in as though we're actually having a conversation together, having a team meeting with a whiteboard here, and so bear with me as I scribble on the board with you and try to walk you through the organization here at headquarters. So I'm going to start just breaking down PSD really simply. So Jeff Isom is our managing director. He is over all of PSD, including the dotted line report from the publishing services managers in each of the areas. So a PSM in the area has a true HR report to the DTA, but there is a very strong dotted line report back here to PSD here at headquarters. Underneath Jeff, we have a variety of groups, and I'm actually going to break them out over here. Just because we want to focus only on one of them. So he has a data team, and this is relatively new over the last couple of years. This team helps look into any of our systems, any of our deliverables that we're creating, and help assess some of the data that surround the work that we do. If you have any requests of yourself to ask for of this data team, let me know. We can submit requests to them at any time, and they can help us turn out any numbers that we need. For those of you who haven't heard of the system Tableau, Tableau is the tool that they use to help report back some of their data findings often, and it's an awesome tool, and we actually have just gotten an enterprise-wide license, which means that anyone can have a license to log into and use Tableau. And so it's a centralized tool that allows us to pull from any of our systems and put information together. So it can reach into World Server and pull out information, and Plunet and pull out information, and Clarity and pull out information, and Workfront, and it can compare all sorts of different data points and give us a really nice, very beautiful, with lots of graphics and colors, report back for any information that you're looking for. So, wonderful data team. Brittany leads that team. Next we have our, I'm going to group these together, HR and finance groups. And they offer just support for us for typical HR and financial needs, from the translation invoicing and some of the other. So several of you know Rod Olson, who does the allocation reports for the FTE, and then Reed Wagstaff, who supports our invoicing process currently. They're both housed here. And then obviously we have the standard HR teams. Another large group here is our client services. And our client service team is relatively new as well, like the data team. It took us a little while. Once PSD was formed about, 5 years ago or so now, and we created PSD, it's taken us some time to refine and mature the organization, and it's always an ongoing improvement process, right? So right now, the client services teams have been reorganized and are undergoing another reorganization. As of last October, they've been undergoing this process where the roles of this team are being redefined. And so I'm going to not give you the whole historical background for this team. I'll just tell you what they do now. This team is what they refer to as the front door of PSD, And so the members of this team are all assigned to different departments: priesthood and family department, family history, welfare, temple, and they go to those departments and work with the people who create the content that we translate, and they counsel with them. They counsel with them on the content itself, understanding audience and needs, and then ultimately how to guide that request through all of our PSD processes, including translation. That's a lot for a single individual to know. The expertise of that particular role is just vast in terms of what's expected of them. And right now, it's pretty widely recognized that they're not all there in terms of their training and their understanding of what really goes into taking a product through ideation all the way through an international deployment of that product. And so we're doing a lot of coaching from our side of things. Several of you may be familiar with the language partner role. That's the role that I was in for the last 2 years. So we've got Zach Nyberg, Dave Williams, and Doug Bayless are now in those roles. And they work hand in hand with this team to help provide feedback and training and counsel on what's needed in the global space. So if you ever have questions about products in terms of collaborating better with our clients, or how do we get farther upstream in the workflow, our language partners are a great resource to accessing this team and beyond into the product management groups that they help support. So that's a lot of work. It's a lot of support, but the heart of PSD is over here in operations. And I'm going to put a name here since it might be relevant to you. And this is where Rob Jorgensen sits. And like I said, it might be relevant to you. Many of you have probably already heard Rob Jorgensen's name. He is currently acting as the Director of Translation until we have a new Director of Translation to replace Steve Hobner, who transitioned out several months ago. So let me come over here and I'm going to walk you through very briefly a variety of groups that are under Rob in this operations space. And so again, I'm going to put them out on this side so that we can continue to focus on how we get down to translation. So over here under operations, there are 4 primary groups in operations. You have broadcasts and events, and I'm so sorry, but I'm going to start using some of the shorthand that we use here just so that I can go a little bit faster. So we have broadcasts and events. We have film and video. So if any of you have worked with our interpretation team or any of the video recordings, you may be familiar with some names like Donovan Platt, Kevin Randall, historically Joe Christensen, all the Bible videos, all of that. They are now housed in this film and video group. So beforehand, they used to be in the translation division, and then it was recognized that they don't actually support translation work. They support the production elements of a video, just the international component of it, and they were recently moved over into this group. So they're not even on our team anymore. The broadcast and events team supports any live events. So they would do all the technical work and the lighting, equipment, everything necessary to set up something like a worldwide devotional. Then you've got a really big one over here, and that's production. What is it called? Sorry, publishing. I'm going to call it production, but we're all production. I'm going to put this as publishing. Okay, this one is huge now, and this division is just ever growing, it feels like. A lot of our project management that is not related to film and video or broadcast production is housed here. So some names that you might be familiar with that moved over into this team last October. We had this big reorganization. I don't know if you were aware of it, but you probably felt the impact of it last October. And so some of the individuals that moved over here into this publishing group were Randall Pixton, Marshall Tapp, and several others that now do exclusively project management. They shouldn't necessarily be into the details of overseeing all the translation handoffs or setting up a translation project, but they do the end-to-end, meaning they help guide it through writing and editing and design and all the way through translation into publishing, all the production work and publishing on out. And so this group includes that project management is a big one. It also, another big one for us is that it includes language production. And so anybody that has to do with the language and design work, anything on, I don't know if you've heard the name Mindy Nelson, that's her team over there. Any of our production tasks go over into this team. So again, we're now interacting with all of these teams on work that all used to be on one team. So I can only imagine how that might feel even more dysfunctional as we push out work that now needs to be coordinated across what feels like this. We're starting to get into hundreds of people are represented on each of these teams. And so we have to figure out how to be really, really tightly coordinated here. Otherwise, the rippling effect as it gets out to you is just so large. If we're dysfunctional, we know you feel it. And so language production being in another team is another one of those high risks for us of not coordinating well between handoffs, because we complete the translation tasks over here in a different group, and we try to chuck it over to production team that does that proofing cycle, and now we're introducing a lot of different groups. So we can talk more about that another time. But just know that language production is over here in this group. Then out of these, I mentioned there are 4 primary groups, so these are 3, and then I'm going to put translation down here. So these are the 4 major operations groups under Rob Jorgensen. Each of these has a different director. Steve Hobner, I'm going to put right here, used to be our director. He is no longer. He hasn't been, as I mentioned, for a couple of months. He moved over into what's called the Correlation Department. The Correlation Department manages the worldwide plan, and Steve Hobner was asked to move into that position to support the management of the worldwide plan. So right now we're looking for a new director. If any of you want to move to Salt Lake, we're still on the hunt to find someone who really can take the lead in that position. And it's likely that it can be anywhere from another 4 to 6 months before we're going to see someone in that spot. Bishop Koze has a particular interest in whomever fills this role, and he said he hasn't quite found the person that he wants just yet. So we're on the hunt for that individual. So that's the translation division. Again, we'll hold and come back to that in just a minute, but I want to tell you some of the other groups that fall under Rob Jorgensen. So 4 major operations teams, but in addition to that, we have right over here, what is his title? Area Production Support. I don't know how many of you have heard of Eamon Stevenson. I'll put his name here. He is in a new role as well, and this role is primarily to support the PSMs, and as Rob Jorgensen helps to facilitate these 4 entities here at headquarters, Eamon Stevenson is seen as the international arm that can reach out and support these 4 entities in the international space. So again, primarily counseling with the PSMs to ensure that they have adequate support in each of those different areas in their area office. In addition to Eamon, we have other things under Rob like marketing and the vendor management. So for any of you that want to try using a vendor partner of any kind, we have a vendor management office to help us with that. What else do we have in this group? And then we've got a lot of just, I'll put business support because he has some business analysts and such. So as you can see, there is a lot happening under Rob Jorgensen. That I will just highlight that because of all of this work happening under him, it makes it a real challenge for him just personally to be able to actively get involved in the translation space. Even though he is functioning as our temporary director, but until we can find someone to replace Steve Hobner, it's just difficult with how much is on his plate for him to really get involved into the granular weed level of what's going on here at our organization. And so it's a challenge for us to try and figure out direction and make sure that you're adequately supported and you don't feel that absence as much as we might feel that here. So there you go. There's all of the external groups that surround us. Now I want to walk you just a little bit through translation. We've got our own complicated structure here as well, and you might not care about any of that, but I just wanted to give you just a little glimpse into how the department is structured right now. A lot of what happens is client services, the program manager role, if you hear me reference that role, they're the team members on these teams. A program manager works with a client, they get a request for a job, they come and work with a project manager, and that project manager pulls resources from all of these groups to complete the work. So that's the workflow right now. Program manager, project manager, production resources, and then it gets delivered back to the client. So underneath Rob in translation, we have a variety of teams. We have, you still see that, okay. We have systems, and that's Dwayne Dougal. And we're working very closely with Dwayne right now on all of the ClueNet implementation tasks. So systems are a lot more prominent in our work right now than we may typically see them. You have the translation project managers. And we used to call these producers. Again, in October, a lot of things started changing, and over the course of the last 6 to 8 months, we've started seeing some of the rippling effects of these changes. The title of producer is one of those changes. We now call them project managers. Sometimes they're shorthanded as TPMs. And so, as I mentioned, that workflow of program manager, project manager, production resources, this team right here helps coordinate all of you individuals are considered production resources. We're all production resources, and so these project managers work hand in hand with those project managers to just coordinate the production resources in our space. And this is Nate Deal. I'm going to guess on how to, let me see, he's got a couple letters in his last name that I always get in the wrong place. I did. Deal. Yep, got it. Okay. So that's Nate Deal's team. People on this team include Ginger Riggs, Paul Vanderhoeven, who else? Hwan-Soo Park. He also has the adaptation team, so Stephanie Graham and her entire adaptation team. They help set up and manage the kickoff of a project. In systems, not only do you have Dwayne who would be implementing ClueNet, but you also have the localization engineers. So Scott and Rick, Scott Killian and Rick Gershbaugh, whom you've probably worked with as well, are over here in this systems team to provide support for the systems that we use. Okay, next we'll put quality and strategy. And this is going to be Greg Perkins. So you don't have to tell anyone, but I just added the strategy myself. He's technically the quality team, but he has some strategists on his team as well that help figure stuff out. And so he considers his group to be a little bit of a hodgepodge right now, where there are a bunch of roles that we're still trying to figure out and define. The language partners are one of those roles. We're trying to figure out how they best interact with client services teams and originating departments. And so he does have a strategy component to his team still, but this includes, as I mentioned before, the language partners, which are Zach Nyberg, Dave Williams, and Doug Bayless, but also Dan Billings. He is our technical strategist. Another person that you might be familiar with is David Geilman, and then Gary Christensen, who does the language quality team that helps resolve some of your online issues. Like if you have publishing issues and everything, that he'll help fix those, also on Greg's team. So that's Greg. Next we have, put this out here, I'm going to put scriptures, temple, and music. And this is Justin Shepard. And you're all probably most familiar with his group. So music did move in there recently within the last year or so, but that's the standard scripture supervisor team that is now expanded into a mixture of temple and music supervisors. And they recently reorganized as well. I think it was about 6 months or so ago, where you had a grouping of scripture supervisors, temple supervisors, and music supervisors, and they changed that to be, instead of aligning by content, they now align by language. And so if you have one language that has a need, that supervisor will support all three of those content types for that language. So it helped consolidate your contact into headquarters to a single contact point for all sacred materials. So that's sacred materials. Next we have interpretation, and that's Danielle Gonzalez. And you're familiar with Sayad Osmani, used to work in that space, and Danielle has been there for a little while, I think maybe about a year or so, and has continued on just managing interpretation in a very similar fashion in that they're event supervisors and they help coordinate headquarter teams and work with your area teams and manage the tie line connection there. So next, I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. Let's see. I think that the last one there would be translation ops. And that's where I fit in. And so I walked you through briefly how the structure under translation ops exists. We have the software translation team, that's Genevieve. We've got our headquarter multi-language office. Francisco is our manager of that. That includes Spanish, Arabic, Lao, Hmong, Haitian, a variety of other languages that are supported here at headquarters. It also includes our language office communication team, the LOC team. That's the same thing. The LOC team is the language office communication team. It includes a support team of Brandon Dupuis, Sayad Osmani, and James Demers, and they've been emailing you a ton and starting to get involved, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the things that they've been doing. But there you go. There's the org chart. Hopefully that wasn't too chaotic and confusing or overwhelming, but if you have any questions about any of this, or any questions about how we're structured down here, or any questions about the translation space in general, please go ahead and leave a comment under this YouTube video. That's great to see people leave comments right there. It's really easy for me to respond and for others to see the questions that you're asking in case they have the same questions. So there's your org chart. One more topic I wanted to discuss quickly this week is an effort that actually you all initiated, whether you knew it or not. We got a flood of concern that came in after the integrated curriculum schedule was released by Ginger Riggs. So many of you are involved in that integrated curriculum project, and when she released the schedule, the concern that we heard overwhelmingly from many of you was that there was an inadequate time to complete that project and to verify that the project was done according to our current level of quality standards. And so we took all of that feedback back, that some came to me, some came to others, and some went directly to Ginger, and we all sat down and discussed why it was that there was such a consistent concern across all language supervisors. It's one thing to have a single office come back and say, we have capacity constraints, this is coming at a bad time for our office, or we happen to have a number of individuals in our office unexpectedly out for whatever reason. And so those are unique situations that would cause a particular language office to not have the capacity to complete the project. But this wasn't that case. It was across the board. People were saying that the estimates for this project were inaccurate. And Ginger's response was, but I did it according to our standards. And so we sat down and reviewed those standards with her, and we discovered that I don't know why this wasn't uncovered before, if it was just the size of this project or the way that the timing hit, but we discovered that our translation project managers, so we'll go back here, these individuals that get all of our project requests, and they set up the expectations, they help define the scope for the project, they also commit to budget and schedule in your behalf, that the tool that they have been using to estimate how long a project will take, the tool itself was built as though you could complete 6 TGP a day, but not just translation, 6 TGP from Enter Language Office all the way through supervisor check a day. For any given project, right? And maybe if you have all individuals in your office working on a project, that's great. You could get through 6 TGP a day. But realistically, if you were to think of it this way, our current estimates say that it takes 1 hour to translate 1 TGP. That's the formula that we've based a lot of our workflow off of. If it takes 1 hour to translate 1 TGP, then you can translate 6 TGP in 1 day. But if you were to try to get through the entire process, then it takes approximately 2 hours to get through our entire process. So it's 1.9 TGP of work to do. So we could guesstimate that that's 2 hours of work. So if it takes 2 hours of work to get from Enter Language Office to supervisor check for 1 TGP, then that means we can get through approximately 3 TGP a day. That's half. That's half of what Ginger was using to estimate. And so when she took the TGP of a project and she laid it out over the schedule, it appeared that you could go twice as fast as you really could go if you were to do all of the tasks. You could get through all of that work if you were just translating, but we know, of course, that you're not just translating. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of what the error was in that estimating process. And so James Demers contacted many of you, particularly the language supervisors, and asked for your help in assessing how long it really takes. The reason he did this, instead of just going to the handbook and saying, oh, 1.9 TGP, so it takes 2 hours, so Ginger, just times your estimate. The reason we didn't do that is we have a suspicion that our estimates in general aren't perfect. And so we could go with historicals, but it was worth asking the question, why is it that it took us until now to realize that the translation project managers were estimating based on faulty numbers? Why did it take so long? We have an assumption, again, without doing lots of testing, it's hard to know for sure, but we have the assumption that the translators are actually translating more than 1 TGP an hour. They're going faster than our current estimates say. And that by going that fast, they've actually allowed for more time in the schedule for some of the later review steps, including more supervisor check time. Because as you know, there's a minimal amount, 5% of the process is allowed for supervisor check, and we know many of you are taking much longer for that. So where did that time come from in the schedules? Again, we think that our translators are going faster, and so that allows for more time to do all of the reviews. So just by having that question, we didn't want to just go with what the book said and say this is perfect information. So he's been asking those questions, and many of you have responded, and we're grateful for that. So continue having that conversation with with James. And if you want, time yourself one day. Look at the clock and say, I'm going to start working on this project now. And at the end of the hour, document how much you've done in that hour, and do that for a couple of days. We would love to hear what the results are of your work. How long does it take to do 1 TGP? For the translate step, for the supervisor, language review, proofreading, for I think I skipped content review, supervisor check. So for the entire process, how long does it take to do a single TGP? We would love to have information from you, because I think that each individual has different skill sets and speed, right? So we're going to get a variety of results back. We also believe that different languages are actually going to take longer or go faster than other languages in general. So it would be great to have that information as well. So we appreciate your patience on that. James is trying to rewrite some of that data right now into a better assumption. It's still not perfect, and it's still not validated by your experiences to tell us what's real, but he's going to make another assumption at the end of the day today and help Ginger adjust those numbers for a better guess, but it's still not going to be perfect. So please keep telling us how things are going from your perspective. Please send in your questions and concerns. Feel free to respond to this video, and we hope that all is going well, and please let us know what we can do to help you. Thank you for everything that you're doing.